It's been a while since we've got any news about Secret of the Mimic, but recently Dawko got an interview with the creative director of Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic, Evan Lampi, and it contains so much important information for everybody to know, including some lore we can use to speculate about what we're going to see in the game. So Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. First of all, make sure to go to Dawko's channel and watch the entire interview. Steelwool was very kind to give this interview, and Dawko was very talented to make it that good, so I need you guys to go watch that video. So if I'm not going to cover the whole interview, what am I going to talk about? Well, first of all, there's some pretty important just information about the game that isn't necessarily lore relevant, but it's stuff that we all really needed to know, and we finally do, confirmed. First of all, the game is launching as a non-VR game. Steelwool pushed back the VR version of Secret of the Mimic in order to focus in and polish the flat version of the game, which honestly, thank God. When Dawko asked about any lessons they learned from Help Wanted 2, even Evan Lampi said one of the biggest takeaways was that you really shouldn't launch these games as VR exclusives. At least, if you do, you're going to cut off a lot of the fan base's ability to be able to play it. So many people when Help Wanted 2 came out said, "This is amazing, I can't play it, I don't own a VR set." And Evan Lampi confirmed that Steelwool saw that, recognized it, and took it into consideration. So when picking one version of the game to optimize for release, they chose the flat one. He also talked about how the game is much more dense and claustrophobic than Security Breach was. Similar in a sense to Ruin, but unlike Ruin, it's just about as long as Security Breach. Granted, these are estimates. We won't have good playtime averages until thousands of people play it upon release. But Evan Lampi said his estimate for how long the game takes to beat a normal once playthrough is about 8 to 10 hours. But if you're going for a more completionist ending and trying to get all the information, then you're looking at closer to 15 to 20. Which, keep in mind, according to HowLongToBeat.com, Security Breach's main story takes 10 hours to beat. All routes takes about 17 hours, and 100%ing the game takes about 25. So these numbers are pretty accurate. If anything, Security Breach seems maybe an hour or two longer, but how much of Security Breach's gameplay was just walking from point A to point B? One thing that was focused on a lot during this interview is how much more compact the map is. He mentioned that the perimeter of the building fits fully within Roxy Raceway, which on one hand does sound small, but he pointed out that there are not only several stories to this building, but there are smaller hallways, secret passageways, things you have to sneak around. One of the complaints about Security Breach was that it's so open that it's hard to make the player feel scared, whereas a map like this that's much more condensed and twisting and winding will have to cause you to turn a lot of corners, and who knows what'll be on the other end. Oh, my poor sleeve. This is what I get for trying to actually dress nice for these videos. My sleeves. You wear one black turtleneck, I swear. So I tell the guy, and he thought I was nuts. Oh, what's this? A sponsorship. Well, alright. Today's video is brought to you by Raycon. Nice. As a father myself, Father's Day is really special to me, and it's not just because I'm receiving gifts, but it's because I'm getting presents from the people I love the most. But as a son of a father, I know how hard it is to get a present for your dad. But luckily, this Father's Day, Raycon is making it easy. Treat dad to everyday earbuds by Raycon. Starting at just half the price of other premium audio brands, Raycon is an affordable present that blows away the competition. One of the best features, honestly, is the active noise cancellation, which can give him a moment of peace in an otherwise hectic day. Observe. But more than anything, I love that these earbuds can be used so often. They have a 32-hour battery life, so you're good all day. But even if you forget to charge them, they have a quick charge feature, where 10 minutes of charging can yield 90 minutes of battery life. And luckily, they're ergonomically designed, so they're comfortable to wear all day long. Being super real, these are my go-to earbuds when I'm out and about, especially when I listen to podcasts on walks. And it's a good thing that they have these protective case covers, because I am clumsy, so now when I drop them in the street, they're better protected. And they look dope too. If you want to get a pair of everyday earbuds for yourself or dad, go to buyraycon.com/rytoast for 15% off site-wide. Brought to you by Raycon. Yeah, that's the entire website for 15% off. Thanks again to Raycon for sponsoring today's video. Well, hopefully someone out there can hear me. If I'm stuck on this stage, I might as well give it a shot. But that's all technicals. It's stuff that's super important to know before the game comes out and gives me a lot of peace of mind knowing that this is a dense and meaty game that we're getting to chew on, but I know as well as you that the main reason most of you clicked on this video is lore. And while there wasn't a lot of direct lore talked about for obvious spoiler reasons, the information we did get out of this interview can allow us to speculate as to what we might see in Secret of the Mimic. One of the most important things about the lore is the framework the lore is in, because to be able to successfully predict what's in the game, we need to know what amounts of lore we're working with, and by that I mean the games versus the books. And when Dawko asked Evan Lampi about questions related to the books, he said these two quotes at different points that I think are both very important for this conversation.
And we were developing the game kind of while these books are coming out. So yeah, I will say it's interesting. Again, I won't go into like the books and all of that, but it's interesting to work kind of in dual mediums. I will say if you've read the books, you don't know the full story.
So what does this mean? To be clear, either of these statements are not a direct confirmation either way, but let's try to dissect what these sentences mean. As far as the working in dual mediums, that does make it seem like one story is being told twice in two different mediums, which again bolsters the argument that the Tales from the Pizzaplex books take place in the games. And then as far as his other sentence, you don't know the full story, to me the implication is that the books are part of the story, but there is more to it we haven't seen yet. All in all, I think both of these quotes reinforce the idea that at least the majority of the Tales from the Pizzaplex books take place within the games. So like I've been saying, I'm going to continue to assume that everything we've learned about the Mimic from the books is pretty much one-to-one with the game's timeline. And moving forward, if something comes out in Secret of the Mimic that goes against something we've seen in the books, I'm going to trust the games first, but I'm not going to throw out everything the books have told us. For example, if David is a slightly different age or dies in a different way, while that is significant and needs to be talked about, I don't think it necessitates that everything from the books is wrong. Frankly, the way I see this timeline is right now we don't have information about the Mimic in the games. So when I talk about my game's timeline, I'm filling it in with book information, and any game information that overlaps will replace it, and any game information that doesn't overlap will go alongside it. You know what I mean? And look, that's just my approach. I still think it's perfectly valid to assume that the books aren't fully accurate, or even are completely different, but there is enough overlap that they're still useful to take into account when trying to dissect the story of the games. Now, that being said, one of the bigger questions surrounding all of this is what exactly did he mean by "you don't know the full story yet"? Well, in the story The Mimic, there are several missing bits of information. What? Well, the original story The Mimic shows us Edwin making the Mimic, his son David dying, and one of Fazbear's attempts to collect the Mimic. However, there's plenty of parts of this story that don't appear in the story. For one, we don't know what happens to Edwin after he beats the Mimic. After David dies, the Mimic continues to mimic his son David, but that sets Edwin off on a grief-filled tangent and he just beats the hell out of the Mimic. But afterwards, he goes missing. I would assume he died, but he appears later in the storyteller as an old man. So he did survive whatever happens next. I guess he just disappeared. We also know that while two Fazbear crews were sent to collect the Mimic, neither of them were successful. We don't know if there were any crews sent before the first one we know about, and we don't know which crews were sent after the one we read about died. We also don't know what Fazbear did with the Mimic once they collected it. All we know is that it ends up in a hidden storage somewhere. So my guess for what "if you've read the books you don't know the full story" means is that the story of this game is going to focus on one of those blank spaces that we don't have information for. Now, how the books are being handled aside, there was some bits of lore that were teased in this interview. Again, the majority of it wasn't said for spoiler reasons, obviously, but we have information about the nature of the lore that we can use to speculate. When describing the lore of the game, Evan Lampi said that the main story was approachable so much that any new player could play the game and understand what was happening, which obviously, that's important for any game. You want them to be dense and lore-filled for any veteran fan to appreciate, but you don't want to alienate new players. You need to make your games approachable to new players or your franchise will die. But he stressed that this game was made for FNAF fans. And the deeper you look, the deeper the lore and references to other games will get. And he said himself it is filled with connections to previous games and other Fazbear things, which is kind of exactly what I was hoping for. One of the reasons I think Help Wanted 2 didn't stick with the fanbase as much is because besides the 2 endings, a lot of that game was fairly self-explanatory. Within a week, we all kind of agreed who the main character was, what we were doing, and the greater context of when the game takes place. The only real questions that stand out from Help Wanted 2 are what do the endings exactly mean, and we don't have the information in Help Wanted 2 to solve it, so it's kind of a back burner thing. Once we get newer games after that point in the timeline, we can look back at those endings and try to piece them together. Because of that, there weren't any mysteries to solve within the game itself. So one of my biggest hopes was that Secret of the Mimic would be filled with these, and from what it seems like, this game is going to be filled with not only secrets to solve within the game, but secrets that connect to other previous games, which is huge. And as far as how the lore was written, Evan described it as a co-creation between Steelwool and Scott Cawthon himself. He later went on to describe it as sort of a pyramid, where everyone's working together, but Scott is leading the charge. So, as is always, if you don't like the story of this game, don't blame Steelwool, it ain't their fault. Like, this still is Scott Cawthon writing the majority of these games. It is insane to me how many people online, especially on FNAF TikTok, which is a barren wasteland, I'll have you know. There's like 3 really cool creators and the rest is insanity. But it's insane to me how many people are like, man, modern FNAF sucks ever since Steelwool took over all of the writing and Scott retired. Like, you're living in a separate reality. None of that is true. Now, here's the thing that actually gives us a lot of information on what we might be seeing connect to the other games. And it all stems from one side comment from that interview. Evan confirmed that Murray's Costume Manor is not a Fazbear facility, which we kind of already assumed. He's stated to be a contractor in the trailer, so it would make sense that his establishment isn't part of Fazbear's. But thinking about that a little bit further, that brings up a lot of questions for how this game will connect to the rest of the franchise, and it has to do with the technology within Murray's Costume Manor. To open up this question further, we got these 2 posters throughout the interview. Both of them very important, but I want to focus on the data driver itself. This device is a Murray original, and its tech is made to interact with several of the terminals throughout Murray's Costume Manor. Terminals that have the Helper program that looks a lot like an old version of Helpy. So if that is true, and these are all things created by Edwin Murray within a non-Fazbear facility, does that mean that all of this technology that later would turn into the Fazwrench and Helpy were originally created by Edwin Murray, and not Fazbear Entertainment? This links back to a question I answered on the Freddy Fazbear Pizza podcast that also comes out on this channel, submitted by Shannon, and the question boiled down to how much of Fazbear Entertainment's technology was originally created by Edwin. After all, Edwin Murray is a genius inventor, but up until now, we assumed the only genius inventor in Fazbear's was Henry Emily. He's the guy who made the original Fazbear animatronics after all, but if we're talking about the Fazwrench, Helpy, the Mimic, and all of these other pieces of technology, then the name of the creator isn't Henry anymore. His name is Edwin. He made the Mimic, and it was difficult to put this warehouse together. But unfortunately, in the books, we don't know what happened after the Mimic was beaten. We don't know how much of his technology was taken by Fazbear. After all, if Edwin entered into a contract with Fazbear to create something and didn't, when they collected what he was working on, did they collect as much as they could as collateral? And since Edwin is MIA, he's not there to contest it. If so, the crux of all of this and how it might connect to the other games really comes down to how much of Fazbear technology began as an Edwin original. Because at least looking through this trailer, Helpy, the Fazwrench, and Music Man are all on that list. Where does that list end? If we see Fredbear or Spring Bonnie in this facility, does that mean Edwin made the spring locks and not William? After all, we know that Henry Emily made the original animatronics, but we always just kind of assumed that William made the spring locks because they were kind of worse. But it seems completely possible that Edwin Murray was the original creator of the spring lock suits, something we might find out in Secret of the Mimic. And I have more thoughts from this interview, but I'll save them for my full prediction of the game a few weeks from now before it comes out. Again, I cannot stress enough, this is like less than a fourth of what they talked about in that interview. Go watch the Dawko Steelwool interview. It's an amazing video, and Dawko, you did an amazing job. But let me know what other information from Secret of the Mimic has you excited. For me, it was all this talk about how dense and compact the game would be, because it's a huge change of pace and a breath of fresh air compared to Security Breach. In the meantime, I just started posting my Split Fiction playthrough with my wife on the second channel, Rytoost. All of those videos were originally live streamed on Twitch at twitch.tv/RyToastYT, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, 9 p.m. EST every single week. If you want your fan art featured on the channel, make sure to share it with #ToastArt. A huge thank you to the best channel members, the Dough Risers, and until next time, as always, stay toasty, slices.